Welcome to our IFAS series. Today we are doing the memories of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, as we always do. And we are coming to you from Inter-IFAS at the Institute House in Gita Nagari. Our team is here with us, Kishirani and Anna. And Leela, I think, is not yet here. She will be here. And we're really excited because today on our memory series, we have a really amazing, wonderful, just so dedicated personality that I am so excited to introduce to all of you, to all of our listeners. So we want to share how grateful we are that all of you come every week to listen to these series on memories of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. And so today we're introducing you to Cintamani Devi Dasi. Cintamani will share her memories. And there's one thing I wanted to share before we jump right into her speaking, is a memory I have of her that's so very important to me. And so that memory is how I met Cintamani. And she was a student at one of the universities in Washington, D.C., and somehow I went to a program. I don't remember the details of going to that program, but when I went to that program, I met this amazing personality, this person that I was just like, who is she? She is, she's so spiritual, and she has all these amazing, beautiful qualities. So I was just really enamored by who this person was. And I later learned that she was a part of a group in Washington, D.C. that was called the Divine Universal Sisterhood. And somehow or other, she invited me, and I guess she and her team, there were other people there on her team, they invited me to share at that program, Divine Universal Sisterhood. And after doing that, somehow we started developing a relationship. I started asking her about her spiritual path and started inviting her to some of the programs we were doing, and she would come. And that's where she met His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, and that's what led her to accepting him as her teacher, as her spiritual teacher. And so one thing that I clearly remember, and I will be ever grateful to her, is she believed in us so much that she arranged in her university at that time a room where Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj could come and give classes. And at the time, you know, we were new back to Washington, D.C. Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj initially started his teachings in Washington, D.C. However, we had been in Africa for almost 10 years. And then when Cintamani invited us to do the programs, invited Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj to do the programs, within a few weeks or so, there were like 400, 500 people coming to these programs. And so I'm always eternally grateful to Cintamani for having that kind of, you know, love and trust in us as persons, especially Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, that have something that can help people, you know, to change their lives. And I have seen how just these teachings have helped so many, many, many people. She's been instrumental in that. So Cintamani, we thank you so much for that. You know, Cintamani is like, she's been married for 29 years, somewhere like that. She's married to Jagannath Pandit, and we'll meet him later. And they have two beautiful girls, Devaki and Jana. And she's a psychotherapist by profession. And she's also a part of the Grihastha Vision team. Actually, she and her husband, they're two of the main facilitators in with that team. They've done incredible services over the years with the Grihastha Vision team. And so we're just so happy and so grateful to have her here sharing some memories of Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. So welcome, Cintamani Devi.
Jai, thank you so much. You mentioned love and trust. So those words really resonated with me. And for sure, I learned about love and trust from your association, from my interactions with you all of these years, from the association of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj and all his followers and well-wishers. So I want to thank you from the depth of my heart for blessing me with that introduction. How you describe me is something I aspire towards, but because you've spoken it, now I'm blessed. So I want to thank you very much for that. And I want to thank the team. Inner IFAS is such a powerful team that's dedicated to offering gems that can help people transform their lives, deepen their love for themselves and others, do greater service in the world. And the potency behind what you do is that your lives reflect those principles. So I just want to thank the whole Inter-IFAS team for the services that you do and the inspiration you offer to the world. And again, thank you for this opportunity to share memories of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. And for sure, when we speak about great souls, there's so many great souls in the world practicing so many different traditions. And anytime we get an opportunity to speak about them, we're actually blessed. So I thank you for this opportunity. So as Rajalila was mentioning some of her memories about me, it really brought back many feelings and great appreciation for some of the experiences I've had with His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. And when I think of him, the theme that comes to mind is unconditional love and unconditional service. And we often read about the value of unconditional love, and it's something that we all aspire towards, but it's very rare to come upon those personalities who actually reflect that in what they say and, more importantly, what they do. So Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, as many of you know who have read about him or met him or learned things about him, really exemplify those qualities. And there's so many, just tons of thoughts and memories and impressions that are there when I think about those qualities. And for me, the first or the strongest way that it's expressed is how he interacted with every single person. As was mentioned by Mother Rajalila, I have two daughters. My husband and I have two daughters. One is 28 and one is 21. And they had the opportunity of having the association of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj their whole lives. And the way that he interacted with the children was very instructive of someone who sees others beyond their bodies, who sees their soul, who sees the greatness in them beyond any external covering. And he was always very loving as he interacted with the children, always very giving, always very kind. And a quality that was very, very amazing is that he didn't relate to the children as if they were little kids. You know, often, and I'm one who sometimes does this, we might relate to children by talking, you know, baby talk or talking in less complicated words. He truly, by his dedication to his spiritual teacher, saw everyone as a spirit soul, and independent of the body, he related to them in the fullness of their soul. So when he spoke to the children, he spoke to them as if they were adults, as if they were very advanced souls, which many of them are. Often children are that way. So I remember when we would have classes, he might ask the children questions, like pretty advanced questions, and they would answer in ways that were amazing. And I might not think to even ask a child those questions. Often when the children spoke in class, he would respond to their questions in a way that was loving, very accepting, but also challenge them to bring out more of their love and more of their knowledge and more of their, you know, spiritual awareness. So that was quite instructive on a lot of different levels. One, it was instructive in just appreciating the value of every soul, and also just seeing someone relate in such a loving, personal way. And so Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj really emphasized community, as you know, all of us know and are very inspired by. And something that was very striking to me is that his emphasis on loving relationships and how intentionally interacting with everyone he met and intentionally training those who took shelter of him, those who read his books, those he interacted with, on how loving relationships are the basis of community. Often when people think about community, they think of building buildings, or they think of raising money, or they think of getting structures in place. But what we saw practically in so many of his projects around the world, and the Institute for Applied Spiritual Technology in Washington, D.C., the Institute for Applied Spiritual Technology in Pennsylvania, and all of the different projects, was that the loving relationships that are cultivated amongst those who are part of those projects is what creates the foundation and the glue to have the projects be successful. And that started with him. It started with how he treated each and every one of us. So for, you know, example, he would do different exercises. We would have meetings, like different morning meetings, different meetings. And the exercises would be to really challenge us to go deeper. For example, every New Year, you know, often on New Year's Eve, many of us were accustomed to maybe going to a party and just maybe staying up until midnight. What we did in Institute for Applied Spirituality on New Year's Eve, you know, we'd have different, you know, fun activities where we would share, and we would have, meals together. But one particular activity we did every New Year's is we would have a notebook. And each of us walked around to each person and we would ask, what do I need to work on? And the guidelines of that activity were that you were requested not to respond, not to have any defenses, not to defend, but to just receive. And you had to go around to every single person who was there that evening and answer those questions. What do I need to work on? And you had your little notebook and you would write it down. And the goal was to really receive in a welcoming fashion what each person said, and to look at, how can this help me to be a better person in service to others? How can this help me to be a better person in service to God? How can this help me to be a better person to make a contribution to the world? And that was quite confronting, because many of the people who were who came to the programs at the Institute were people who were professionals and who were leaders in their field and who had done so many things, in different posts. So many of us had big egos and thought that, and also many people had been on different spiritual paths. And so he was dealing with people who pretty much were kind of know-it-alls and, thought they had exposure to be able to really give orders or to say how things should go. So we were really being challenged to go deeper in love. And these exercises were to help us tone down the ego that gets in the way of our loving relationship with God and with others, and to increase our loving nature. So to be able to just have that notebook and to walk around to each person and to write down anything they said, any way they said it, and to just really receive was just very transformational. Something else that he would do is he was very committed to honesty and being authentic. And Rajaleela had the wonderful role to support many of us in working through some of our conditioning around that. So if there were conflicts between the people in the Institute, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj would ensure that those two people were brought together and would be challenged to honestly and authentically discuss what the conflict was. And often Mother Rajalila was the mediator and guide to help facilitate that. And that wasn't an easy role because we were really challenged to honestly share what was in the way of our deeper connection with each other, our deeper connection in service, and ultimately our deeper connection with God. I remember an exercise that he did in Gitanagari project in Pennsylvania, where he had the person sit in the center of a circle, and they had a cloth over their head. And there were people sitting around that person in a circle. And those people, those, other participants in the workshop, the assignment was to talk about what you would say about that person at their funeral. And that was quite confronting because you were sitting in the center of a circle, you had a cloth over your head so you couldn't, see the people who were talking, and you just had to just be quiet and still. And those persons shared what they would say about you at your funeral. And Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj would do many, many things at one time. So that exercise served multiple purposes. And for me, my experience of that, and one of the intentions of that, was to help me to be really present to what would I like for people to say when I left my body? And am I living my life in a way now such that if I left my body today, what they would say about me would be the highest that God would want of me, that my spiritual teachers would want of me, that my associates would want of me. It also created connection amongst those who were doing the exercise, because it gave them an opportunity to speak about that person. And one critical thing it did, and Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj emphasized this his whole life, is to have us not take any moment for granted. So when you're sitting having people speak about you as if you left your body, that made you very aware of how short life can be, and to not take moments for granted. So those are some of the examples that I can think of in terms of the different emphases he placed on loving relationships, deepening relationships. And so back to the issue of the way he related to children, one thing that was very critical that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj incorporated in terms of community development was samskaras. And in different spiritual traditions, different cultural traditions, there are rites of passage that are incorporated into the culture to help mark important times in the community members' lives. And in the Vedas, in the scriptures from ancient India, there's very specific rites of passage that mark important parts in people's lives and also create a greater sense of community. So he was very intentional on helping us see the value of those rites of passage, not just in a social material way, but in a relational, eternal, spiritually enriching way. So for example, if a couple was interested in conceiving a child, there were certain activities and certain prayers and certain events that would take place to help to call forth a soul that was spiritually committed and that was reflective of the combined heart desire of that couple. And when my husband and I were, planning our children, because this structure was incorporated in the community, rather than it be like, a secret kind of private event. I remember for our second daughter, we called the whole community and said, hey, we're, planning on conceiving. Can you please pray for us? Can you send your well wishes? We also had ceremonies for, both my children prior to conceiving them. And then when the children were born, they had a naming ceremony where Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj actually whispered the children's name in their ear. And then I believe whispered it in my husband's ear, and then he whispered it into my ear, and then the name was announced. There were other God brothers and God sisters of Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj who were there, who lended support and spiritual potency. The whole community came out. People came from other states. Another rites of passage is first grain ceremony, when the children are about 6 months and they're at that point where they can take solid food. So we also performed the first grain ceremony for probably, I don't want to say hundreds, but maybe it was hundreds of children. And again, this is bonding for the community, it's bonding for the child, it's bonding for the parents. At about 5, when the children start school, he also performed the starting school ceremony, where the child has a little slate and there's a Brahmin, and the Brahmin helps the children form their first words in Sanskrit. And again, the whole community was there. When the girls turned 13 and they started their menses, there was a rites of passage for that. There were so many rites of passages that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj instituted that again did so many things at once. It really, what it did is it taught us how to love, and it taught us what it felt like in all our interactions with him to be loved deeply and unconditionally. It taught the children the palpable nature of loving spiritual authority. And it created in all of us a deep desire to hear what he had to offer and what other spiritual teachers have to offer, because it was offered with such love and care and intention and precision, with the ultimate goal of having us appreciate the limited time we have in these bodies and how to utilize these bodies with a sense of urgency. But the degree to which any of us were willing to perform any austerity to do that was due to the loving example and commitment and care that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj not only showed those who were around him, but showed everyone who came in contact with, through his books, through his lectures, through his travel. And I see the influence of there's not, and you know, all those different areas of influence I mentioned, but particularly I see it with the children. And I'm just so appreciative of how in this day and time, when there can be so many distractions for all of us, that I see so many of the children who Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj interfaced with, and also many of his God brothers and God sisters who have a similar loving mood, have been able to kind of share that loving protection such that the children at young ages want to serve God. So I'll stop now in case I'm going over time and if there's any other feedback. But I think I want to say in closing that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj taught me by his loving example of a father that I could trust and have faith in and surrender to our ultimate Father, Lord Shri Krishna, God, Allah, and his focus on thy will be done and full surrender to the will of the Lord by his example through his whole life and how he approached his time of leaving his body has given me courage by his example to try to face anything that comes my way with surrendered prayers and a small faith that Krishna is taking care of me and he's there for me, and everything he does is for my highest good. And it was from the example of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj in living color, how he lived his life, that keeps me stable. And when I feel nervous or uncertain or afraid, I just think of his example, and I think of his mentor, and I think of his God brothers and God sisters and so many great souls, and that kind of gives me strength. So I'm eternally indebted to him. I'm eternally indebted to his first line soldiers, Mother Vajalila, Mother Yashoda Mai, so many dedicated disciples, Kunti, Madhava, just, you know, so many. So I just want to thank you for this opportunity that I can be blessed by getting a chance to speak about him in these moments. So thank you so much.
Thanks for sharing. This is definitely heartfelt sharing about His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. You know, I was wondering, yes, given that you have been serving Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj since 1988, you know, in the greater community of ISKCON, the community of Gitanagari, you are raising your girls in such a way that they are amazingly exemplary of Bhakti practitioners. And I'm wondering, what is it that keeps you inspired to stay in the community of Srila Prabhupada's ISKCON?
Just hearing that question, I just feel so full. I feel inspired by the examples of dedication and true commitment to practice love. You know, Bhakti is service to the Supreme Lord and service to other living entities. And in this path, from the time that I met you, from the time that I've met so many devotees to my time now, I see such a broad expanse of people who are willing to sacrifice their very life to actually love others. I mean, ISKCON is a volunteer organization. It's an organization of people who've come together to just give of their hearts and serve. And, you know, my children live in this community in, you know, Pennsylvania. And from the time they were born, they've met such a broad range of people. My children know people from probably 30 different countries. They have so many different mothers. You know, any weakness I have or any weakness that my husband has, they've had so many mentors to teach them. They've had people who've taught them music, people who've taught them Sanskrit, people who've taught them academics, people who taught them farming, people who taught them care of the cows, people who've taught them, like, if you just can think about it, my kids have been exposed to that. Mentors who have inspired them by their spiritual interest and commitment and just loving care. So if we go to any country, any state, there are temples there. There's a welcoming home anywhere that you go. So you never feel isolated. You never feel that you don't have a connection. And Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was so committed to having us see the value in all religious traditions. So he would make connections with different ministers and different imams. And so I feel I could even go to any place and go to a temple or go to a mosque and create loving connection with people there. So I feel that his mentor, Srila Prabhupada, has empowered him, and by his surrender, to be able to place in my heart a desire to want to see God and God's children all around me, and to be blessed with those who have that same commitment. So, you know, even in these challenging times right now with the pandemic, I feel so nurtured and so cared for because of our local community and the larger ISKCON community, that you can go on Facebook and you can go on Zoom, and there's people who are giving hours and hours and hours every day to give of themselves to help everyone connect with their ultimate highest connection, which is their connection with God. And no matter what happens outside of you, you always have that. So that's what keeps me going. Those structures and those people are actually holding me up. So I just feel humbled and honored and blessed, because without that, I don't know where I would be or what I would do. So I'm just grateful.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. This is wonderful. I was wondering, Anna, do you have any question for Cintamani?
Thank you so much, Cintamani. Thank you for your enthusiasm. I can feel how the emotions are really, you're really full of all that joy and happiness. And when you remember Bhakti Tirtha Swami, in the beginning you mentioned that he, thank you so much, by the way, for telling us how his role with children. It was so practical. Your memories were so directly practical with younger generation. Can you, I don't know, I just wonder if you remember one or two examples of how you mentioned with children, he didn't do baby talk. He didn't do any of that. Like, he would talk to them as if they were very developed, advanced souls. Do you have any examples of how he would talk to like little children in that way?
I remember, so Mother Yashoda Mai, who also did one of these memories, has her eldest daughter's name is Ladini. And Ladini was the first child that was born in the Institute for Applied Spiritual Technology in Washington, D.C. And she'll be 29 in a couple weeks. And she's very special. And I remember in Gitanagari, because Yashoda Mai and I moved to Gitanagari in 1996, and there was a class in our temple here. And Ladini was probably, she's born in 91, she might have been 5. And so it was a Srimad Bhagavatam class. And Ladini, who's very advanced and a very special little girl, she raised her hand very comfortably because she was very confident and very self-expressed. And she asked a question, and my husband has the video. We watched it about a year ago. I don't remember the question, but he responded to Ladini like he would respond to any adult. And he asked her a question, a very like Sastra question, and she responded back, and he responded back. It was a dialogue of very high philosophy. And I remember thinking like, wow, you know, and the advanced souls, because they're relating to us as spirit soul, they actually fan that flame and they bring that out of us because they see that in us. So that was one example. Yeah, that's the example that came to mind. And something else that came to mind as you were talking, or as you asked your question, is how Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was very, very sensitive, as we all know, to different, he was very attuned to supporting the whole person, mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical, and mental needs. And he was very attuned to different temperaments of people and the developmental dynamics that would unfold in different age groups. So he's very sensitive to teenagers and to young people who were in that phase of negotiating, making a commitment to their spiritual life. And so he spent time with children of all ages, but he would have conversations with the teenagers that were very, where he would inquire about challenges that they were facing. And he would be willing to talk about anything. So they could feel safe, talk to him. One of my god sisters, I think, mentioned last week about how we would have picnics and he would make himself available with all the different age groups and engage with all the different age groups to help all of us and particularly the young people, to be able to get their needs met, because young people, and I mean all of us do, but have needs for play and physical exertion and those types of things. So he was able to make for all age groups, and this was critical for the children, that any needs that they had were able to be facilitated, valued, honored, and most importantly, channeled into their Christian conscious life. So the children didn't have to feel they had to go to a party, because all the adults would come together and we would play like, music that the kids would like, games that the kids would like. And now like, this is what like the householders would do. And with the intention of how do we make our Krishna conscious community a welcome place for everyone? And so he trained us in that way to have Krishna consciousness be a welcome place for everyone. So our kids didn't need to try to go to other places because everything was available. And that was from the example of Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, because he helped us to feel comfortable with any challenge we had, anything we wanted to talk to him about. Nothing was taboo. So as parents, we learned to do that with our kids. And so they could get their needs met practically within the Krishna conscious community.
Thank you so much.
Jai, thank you. And Kishori, anything from you for Cintamani before we end our program, our series?
Thank you so much. I'm just really grateful for everything you described. It's like examples and all these details, how Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was interacting with others. It's so impressive. And yeah, it's just inspires a lot to learn of his teaching more and read his books more and spend more time with his disciples. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you so much for coming on, Cintamani. We're really grateful, and it's been such a wonderful 40 minutes of sharing about His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. Even I'm so inspired to hear about your sharing about the children. It's just, it brings back so many memories of how he interacted with the youth. And I'm guessing that some of them probably miss that. I'm guessing that. So as we do sometimes. Thank you. And I hope that you will come back again. We have other series on 2 different days in the week. And we would love to invite you to come back and speak with us about being calm, being compassionate, being confident, being courageous, any one of those. We would love that so much. So thank you very, very much. Thank you for coming on.
I'd really like to thank you all, because it's by your dedicated commitment that you're making these available. So thank you.
Haribo, Hare Krishna.
Haribo.